Okay, so one of my favorite games to play on the ROG Ally and other handheld devices is a game that actually came from the PS5. It is Returnal. So right now I'm playing Returnal on all three of these devices. It's the ROG Ally, the AyaNeo 2S with the 7840U, and the OneXplayer Mini Pro with the 6800U. So I just wanted to test out Returnal performance on these three devices, running at pretty much their max power profile right now. So the OneXplayer Mini Pro maxes out at 28 watts. The AyaNeo 2S maxes out at 33 watts, and the ROG Ally, when unplugged, maxes out at around 25 watts. Sustained, it can boost up to 30, but I've already passed the 30-watt boost time limit. So you can see I'm running at 25 watts right now. So 25 watts, 28 watts, 33 watts respectively. This device is actually running at 34 watts. So that should give a boost in performance theoretically, but once you get past like 28, 30 watts on these processors, it's pretty much diminishing returns. I am at 1080p on all of these devices, 1080p low settings with FSR set to performance. So this should give us the best case scenario for performance between these devices. I have them all at 1080p low settings FSR on performance. So I'm gonna run the benchmark here on all of these devices just so you can see the performance here. I'm going to run the benchmark on all of these devices just to see the difference in, I guess, synthetic performance. Gaming in the actual game is going to vary based on the scenario, but I just want to run the benchmark just so we can get a sense of the performance level. I'm going to try to run these at the same time here. It doesn't really matter, but just for this video purposes, I'm going to try to run the benchmarks all at the same time, and we can get a sense of how these devices perform. So it looks like the 2S got into the benchmark first, and then the ROG Ally, and then the OneXplayer Mini Pro. So just looking at the numbers here, the AyaNeo 2S seems to be in the lead a little bit. So I'm seeing in the mid 40s here. I see it drop down to like 37 here. The OneXplayer Mini Pro is at around 30 FPS. I saw 29, 28, the lowest. So all in a good range here. The OneXplayer Mini Pro seems to be lagging behind the most. I guess that's to be expected. This is the 6800U versus the 7840U and the Z1 Extreme. But we all know the Z1 Extreme is just a 7840U that's been tweaked a little bit. And so it's pretty much the same architecture between these two. This is the older architecture here. But we should get a sense of the performance. This Returnal is a very graphically intense game. If you ever played it on a handheld, you know how much these handhelds struggle to play Returnal. So yeah, this is just going to give us a sense of, how these games perform and how they compare to each other. I'm expecting that these two, of course, are going to win. I'm expecting this one to come in third place just because it's like a generation behind. But we're going to see how far apart they actually are and if there's a big leap between these generations. I will note that this device has 32 gigabytes of RAM. This device also has 32 gigabytes of RAM, and the ROG Ally only has 16 gigabytes of RAM. That is usually enough for gaming. I have this set to allocate 8 gigabytes of VRAM for this test, and I believe the OneXplayer Mini Pro allocates 6 gigabytes for VRAM, and the AyaNeo 2S also allocates 6 gigabytes for VRAM. So we get a sense of, how they did. So right off the bat, I can see this is interesting, guys. This is very interesting because the OneXplayer Mini Pro actually won this test. 43 average FPS, you can see here. 43 average FPS. The the ROG Ally got 42 FPS on average, and the AyaNeo 2S tied the ROG Ally with 42 FPS on average. That's very interesting. So I'm seeing my GPU on the AyaNeo 2S maxed out at, average 90% usage. The ROG Ally 95% usage. And let's check out the Oh my goodness, this probably explains why the OneXplayer Mini Pro won this battle by 1 frame. The GPU average was 100% usage. So the average on this was the entire power that the GPU could push out. The OneXplayer Mini Pro averaged full power on the GPU for the entire test, which is very interesting. I can see that the CPU usage was only 7% on average, 4% on average on the AyaNeo 2S, so 4% CPU and 6% CPU usage on average. This is very interesting, you guys. I was not expecting this. Yeah, you can see I have never run this test on all three of these devices at the same time. So this is actually a surprise to me. But this did win this test by 1 frame. Um, I was not expecting that. Of course, I can run the benchmark multiple times just to see, how they do back to back. But yeah, I mean, in the benchmark, the OneXplayer Mini Pro does come out on top, which is very unexpected, you guys. I was not expecting that at all. Let's just get into some gameplay real quick just to see, how it performs. I have a video showcasing the gameplay on the ROG Ally. I was really not expecting the OneXplayer Mini Pro 6800U to come out with the win like that, you guys. I was not expecting that at all. So let's get into some gameplay here just to, check it out. But this is very interesting. I don't know if it's just a driver issue. I'm guessing it's like a driver thing. But yeah, so here you have it, the OneXplayer Mini Pro 6800U came up with the W in Returnal. Of course, it's not going to be the same in every game, and you see we did have some starters there. But I guess just in this benchmark, it was able to utilize the GPU power more effectively, averaging 100% GPU usage. This is 90, so 10% of the GPU on average was not being used, and then 5% on average was not being used on the ROG Ally. So yeah, that's pretty much it, you guys. I will say that if you have to ask me, is it worth it to go from the 6800U to the 7840U? That just depends on you. I mean, if I think it's worth it to go for the ROG Ally because of the price difference, but considering that the AyaNeo 2S is pretty expensive, considering the gap in performance between these two is pretty much negligible. I would say that unless you cannot get an ROG Ally, then RG Ally is a pretty good choice. I will say that you do have, more ports on here, so that is always a bonus. You can also use regular eGPUs on this, but you need the XG Mobile eGPU. You get double the RAM, but we can see that the RAM isn't really an issue for gaming. It's going to be the GPU is going to max out long before your RAM maxes out in most cases. So yeah, I mean, there you have it. I'm not gonna take any more of your time, but it was an interesting test. I will say that it is worth it to go for the RG Ally. But if you're happy with something like if you're happy with the 6800U devices, like if you have a OneXplayer Mini Pro, I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to get one of these new devices because you're only gonna see a slight increase in performance, across a range of games. You're only gonna see 10 to 15% performance gain. So if you already have this and you're happy, you can ride this out for like another year or two or three or four. Keep it in your back pocket whenever you need it. But that's just my 2 cents. It was a fun little experiment. Anyway, let me know what else you want to see, and I'm gonna get out of here. Peace.